Good morning, everybody. Let's start off with a song. God is so good. God is so good. God is so good. He's so good to me. He died and rose. He died and rose. He died and rose. He died and rose. He's so good to me. He answers prayers. He answers prayers. He answers prayers. He answers prayers. He's so good to me. God is so good. God is so good. God is so good. He's so good to me. Amen. I have been planning this morning to do a little storytelling based on one of the parables of Jesus. I'm a little intimidated after all the open mic time. Special pigs and, and the swing, to get the push. So I don't know if I can man up, but I'll try. Jesus tells a parable in Matthew 20. It begins this way. For the kingdom of heaven is like a master of the house who went out early one morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. And after agreeing with the laborers for a denarius a day, he sent them into the vineyard. And he goes on. I'm guessing it's a parable that you have some familiarity with. It's a parable that confuses some people because they say, well, who do the laborers in the vineyard represent? You have these early laborers, the mid laborers, the late laborers. And some have said, well, maybe this is the Jews versus the Gentiles, the ones who've been in the kingdom for a very, very long time, and the ones who come in as the Johnny-come-latelys. Maybe. There might be something to that. Others think, well, it's when you come into the kingdom. Some are just kind of raised in the church, and they come in as a child, and others come in very late in life. And that's the difference between them. Maybe. Yeah, I think that's got some validity to it as well. I want to look at it just a little bit different way today, and let me tell it my own way, if I could, if you'd give me that grace. Once upon a time, there was a man who needed to go labor in the vineyard. He had a wife and kids, people to feed, bills to pay. And this time of year was a good time of year to go and get some day labor. So he went out and he stood in the marketplace. He stood there early in the morning as the sun was just coming up. And somebody came along and said, I need some laborers in my vineyard. And his hand was up and he was chosen. So he went out and he was promised a day's pay for a day's work. And so he went out and he labored in the vineyard, and he watched as the sun rose to about midday, mid-morning. And he labored under the heat as the sun was directly above him. And he kept laboring as the sun started its path towards the mid-afternoon. And as the day came later, he was still working hard. And all along, he saw other laborers coming in, but he was working for that denarius, for that day's pay. And at the end of the day, the master said, okay, everybody line up for pay. If you came last, then you get paid first. If you came first, you get paid last. And so he was standing in line at the back of the line, and he heard this cheer coming up from the front of the line. He said, well, what's going on? Well, as they came back, they said, the master gave us a whole denarius. I just worked here an hour. And he thought, boy, that's great. Because what am I going to get? I've been working here 12 hours. So he gets to the front of the line, and he puts out his hand, and he gets a denarius. He's a little upset. And he asks the master, what's going on? Well, let me start over. See, once upon a time, there was a man who really needed some work. He had a wife and kids. He had people to feed, bills to pay. And this time of year was a good time of year to get day labor. So he went down to the marketplace early in the morning, just as the sun was coming up. And somebody came and said, I need workers in the vineyard. And he put his hand up. But he was not chosen. And he watched with little butterflies in his stomach as the sun rose to that mid-morning. And still no one was choosing him to work in the vineyard. And as the sun was high in the heat of the day, he was still there. And he was thinking, I don't know what I'm going to do, because I've got to put food on the table tonight. But he stayed because he was desperate. And he stayed until the sun was working its way down in the afternoon. And finally, somebody came and said, well, why aren't you working anywhere? He said, well, nobody's chosen me. He said, well, come work in my vineyard. And so he went out there and worked. He only worked for about an hour. I mean, he worked hard. He worked hard. And at the end of the day, the master said, okay, you get in line first because you came last. He put out his hand thinking maybe he'd get a couple of pennies. At least it was something. And the master gave him a whole denarius, and he was thrilled, and he ran down that line. And there was this guy down at the end saying, what are you so happy about? And he said, I got a whole denarius for working an hour. My family eats tonight. Yes. Let me tell the story one more time. See, once upon a time, there was a man who owned a vineyard. And he was the wealthy man of the community. He was a major employer. And he liked that because not only was he able to have a harvest, not only was he able to bring grapes and wine and everything for the community to sell, but this allowed him to hire people, and he loved hiring people because every time that payday came and he gave somebody money for their work, he saw the light go on in their eyes. He liked owning the vineyard because he liked being a blessing to the community. And so on this particular day, he gets up early in the morning before the sun's up, and he goes out and he sees some workers there. He says, hey, I need some people to work in my vineyard. He put them to work in his vineyard. He said, I'll give you a denarius. He came along later on. He said, hey, I need some more workers. It's a good day for working. Let's go. And as the sun rose high in the sky, he got more workers. And finally, towards the end of the day, there was still work to be done. And he found some more workers. He said, why haven't you started working today? They said, no one's hired us. He said, I'll hire you. He said, I'll pay you what's right. And at the end of the day, he gave those workers who came last, he said, I'm going to give you a denarius. He says, because I know you have a family. I know you have bills to pay. I know you have people to feed. Here it is. It's all yours. And they went away rejoicing, and their joy made his heart leap. He loved providing that joy. And as the other workers came, he gave them a denarius. He gave them a denarius because he wanted everybody to be blessed. And finally, these workers that had come at the very beginning came and held out their hand, and he gave them a denarius. I said, what's all this about? I was expecting more. He said, well, I told you I'd pay you a denarius. Are you upset because I'm generous? Because I can do whatever I want with my money. And And if I want to bless other people, then I will bless other people. But I'm being fair to you, my friend. You see, I think sometimes we struggle with the story because we're focusing on the workers instead of maybe focusing on the owner of the vineyard. The owner of the vineyard in the story represents God. And most of the stories in the Bible and most of the parables are really stories about God and how He interacts with us. And this story is about how God is so good, as we just sang a few minutes ago. God is so good. He wants to bless His children. He wants to have us and our hearts leap for joy at what He gives us. And sometimes we think it's maybe not quite fair. Sometimes we think it's more than fair, but it's always God's grace and God's blessing. So the next time you read Matthew 20, those parable of the workers in the vineyard, try to think about it not from the human point of view, but try to see the story through God's eyes. Try to see your story through God's eyes. Let's pray.